Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we've got a fascinating stack of sources that pull us into, well, a high-speed cultural paradox. We're talking about the incredible, almost gravitational synergy between the Japanese street racing anime, Initial D, and a very specific European dance genre.
Eurobeat.
Eurobeat. So our mission today is to figure out the shortcut to understand how a single animation
About a kid delivering tofu.
right, in the mountains of Gunma Prefecture, how that fundamentally redefined an entire category of music. It transformed it into what your sources call an auditory accelerator.
And an unbelievably potent cultural meme. I mean, we're looking at media history and musical redefinition, all packed into a screaming synth riff at 160 BPM.
It really is a remarkable deep dive because this wasn't just a successful pairing.
No, it was a total cultural integration. This fusion of Initial D and Eurobeat, it created a hybrid where the sound became, well, completely linked to the physical sensation of speed. So we have to ask the big question, why? Why did a story about racing on the winding Japanese
Well, they have helmet passes, right?
Exactly, the mountain passes. Why did that story become so strongly tied to high-tempo dance music from Italy and Germany?
It's really the definition of a powerful cultural accident.
Okay, let's unpack this. We should probably start with the two components and set the stage in the late 1990s.
Yeah, the context here is everything.
So on one side, we have the anime, Initial D. It's based on Shuichi Shigeno's manga, which started back in 1995. And the setting is everything here, the high mountain roads of Gunma Prefecture. And our protagonist is this really unlikely hero, Takumi Fujiwara.
And Takumi wasn't a professional racer, not at all. He was just doing his family duty. He learned all these incredible sort of counterintuitive drift techniques completely by accident, just by running daily morning tofu deliveries for his father. And he did it in that legendary vehicle, the AE86. The Toyota Sprinter Trueno.
The sources really emphasize that car. And for those of us who aren't, petrol heads, why the AE86? It's an older, small, lightweight coupe. Why did this become the star instead of some, turbocharged monster? That's absolutely crucial to the story. The AE86, which people affectionately call the Hachiroku, 86, it was an underdog. It was known for its lightness and its rear-wheel drive layout, which made it just perfect for learning the difficult, precise art of drifting on those roads.
So it wasn't about raw power.
Not at all. It was about balance technique. The car choice really reflected Takumi's own quiet, unassuming character.
And then the anime adaptation hits in 1998. And they made a very bold production choice to match that high-stakes action.
Exactly. The producers made the innovative decision to use early computer graphics CG for the 3D car action sequences.
Which at the time was pretty new.
Very new. It gave the races this crisp, fast-paced intensity that traditional 2D animation just couldn't capture. And to synchronize with that artificial computer-generated speed, they needed a soundtrack that was, well, equally artificial, equally aggressive, and just perpetually high-tempo.
Which naturally brings us to the music itself. Eurobeat. We all know the name, but this isn't just, generic techno. Yeah. This genre has a very specific and I guess accelerated history in Japan even before the anime.
It does. Eurobeat has its roots planted firmly in the European dance scenes of the late 80s, specifically Italian and German Italo disco and high NRG. But the genre that we call Eurobeat was developed uniquely for the Japanese market.
So what was that transformation process? How did that 80s disco sound get morphed into what we hear in the anime?
Well, the Japanese producers, often working through labels like Avex, they basically standardized and supercharged the sound. They saw that the high energy and simple, repetitive melodies worked incredibly well for Japanese dance culture. So they sped the average BPM up dramatically, pushing it routinely into that 140 to 160 range.
Wow.
And the sound became known for these flashy, emotional synth melodies, punchy bass lines, and English lyrics that focused on themes like fire, passion, or
speed.
Naturally.
So before Takumi even got behind the wheel, Eurobeat was already a thing on the dance floors, right? Linked to para culture, that synchronized group dancing.
Correct. It was pure, high-octane dance floor filler, synthesized, aggressive party music. But the moment those producers decided to take that high-speed beat and apply it to a high-speed vehicle, everything changed.
And that takes us to the synergy. Because it's one thing to just match a song to a scene, but the sources make it clear this is a deeper, almost physical connection. So why did 140 to 160 BPM Eurobeat become the perfect sonic companion for high-speed drifting?
Well, the primary reason is the physical resonance.
Resonance.
Yeah, between the musical rhythm and the visual rhythm of the race. I mean, think about your own experience. When you're anticipating something exciting or you're under duress, your heart rate accelerates.
Right.
That 140 to 160 BPM range, it mimics an extreme, heightened state of human performance. The music felt like acceleration because it matched the internal pace of the action.
So if the AE86 is hitting the gas, the Eurobeat is the sound of Takumi's adrenaline spiking. It wasn't just background noise. It was literally a sonic metaphor for hitting the accelerator.
Precisely. That's why the sources coined that amazing term, auditory accelerator. The music wasn't decorative, it was functional. It let the audience experience the G-force and the speed viscerally through sound instead of just passively watching a car move fast. The music became an active participant.
We see that cemented through those specific tracks that became legendary. You can't talk about Initial D without mentioning Deja Vu or Running in the 90s.
Or Night of Fire. Those tracks are just instantly recognizable sonic cues. They defined the pacing. For instance, Night of Fire has that almost frantic, relentless energy, which is perfect for when the cars are neck and neck. Running in the 90s is often when Takumi is, getting in his groove.
Yeah, focusing that rhythm into the drift.
Right. When those opening synths hit, you just know a critical maneuver is about to happen, and the audience's heart rate responds instantly.
And what's interesting is the secondary reason for this synergy, with sources called the reverse import effect. They took a purely Japanese subject, street racing, set it in the very local Gunma prefecture, and then married it to imported Italian dance music. That feels counterintuitive.
It provided tension through contrast. The local setting was intensely real, grounded in the specific challenges of mountain driving. The sound, however, was highly stylized, highly artificial, and foreign.
And that contrast created something new.
It created this unique, exhilarating hybrid subculture. It felt both familiar because of the racing and totally exotic because of that relentless, synthesized sound.
If we look at the bigger picture, that structure actually paved the way for the global rise of the fandom.
How so?
By packaging a distinctly Japanese art form, anime, with a globalized, easily digestible dance sound like Eurobeat, they created an instant entry point for international audiences.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Western fans, many of whom were already familiar with electronic music, they latched onto that soundtrack immediately. It gave them a ready-made cultural touchstone to get into the story.
And that ensured the fandom could spread so rapidly outside of Japan, especially through the early internet.
Which brings us to the afterlife.
Let's talk about that, because the cultural impact Initial D had on Eurobeat itself is arguably greater than Eurobeat's impact on the anime. It didn't just use the music. It fundamentally saved and rebranded it.
Oh, without a doubt.
The sources are very clear. For an entire demographic, we're talking Gen Z Initial D was their first exposure to Eurobeat. For them, it wasn't old 90s dance music.
It was the soundtrack to Speed, full stop.
And that led directly to a massive revival phenomenon.
It did. By the early 2000s, Eurobeat was kind of declining in its original para-para context, but Initial D gave it a new reason to exist. Suddenly, these decade-old tracks were being sought out, listened to, and celebrated by a new global audience that was obsessed with speed and cars.
The clearest evidence is online, right?
Oh, yeah. You saw these massive trends on platforms like YouTube where Initial D remix and drift compilation videos just went viral. People were repurposing the sound not for dancing in clubs, but for montages of car culture, racing games, anything involving high velocity.
That shift brings us to the second huge impact. The official redefinition. Eurobeat basically stopped being dance music and was formally relabeled.
It was officially rebranded as music for driving or runtime music. The entire sonic palette became intrinsically linked to action verbs. To drift, to accelerate, to compete, to thrill. That's a powerful commercial and cultural reclassification.
The sound itself lost its dance context and gained a kinetic one.
It did. And the third impact, the mumification, is probably the most enduring part of a legacy for a modern listener.
Right. You don't have to have watched Initial D to know Deja Vu.
Precisely. The tracks became mainstream internet pop culture meme material. It's the inherent, high-octane energy of the music that lends itself perfectly to viral, exaggerated comedy.
You see it everywhere.
Whether it's in short-form videos, user-generated content, the music just signals extreme, sometimes absurd, velocity and effort. It's the sonic shorthand for action is escalating out of control.
This brings us to the final and I think most profound connection, the emotional core. We've talked about BPM and imports, but what does this intense, decade-spanning bond really mean for the music's enduring legacy? Why does it still resonate so deeply with fans?
This is where the Japanese source material provides some real insight into the fan experience. Initial D didn't just give Eurobeat a new context, it gave it narrative and deep emotional resonance, or do. It stopped being simple club music and became intertwined with these universal experiences.
Like what specifically?
Well, the sources describe it as being tied to shared experiences of accelerating youth and the memory of loss and victory. The mountain races were metaphors for growing up, for facing challenges, and ultimately for moving forward. That constant, aggressive 160 BPM sound just underscored the idea of rushing toward the future, consuming your limited time at high speed.
That's a really powerful paradox. The music tells a story of striving, of pure speed, but it simultaneously became a medium that tells a story of rushing forward while inevitably losing something.
Youth, time, innocence.
Exactly. And it became the soundtrack of an internal clock running out, even as the AE86 is racing toward the finish line.
And the conclusion drawn by those writing about this is that this unique narrative link made Eurobeat abnormally emotional in Japan. When you hear that sound, you don't just think about racing, you feel the effort, the anxiety, and the thrill of striving to be the best in this very confined, dangerous space.
So the anime finished its run, but the music, as we've noted, it just continues to run all across the internet. The memory of speed, linked forever to that sound, is potent fuel.
That lasting, visceral connection is the true legacy. The sources describe the physical feeling when the music plays as feeling your heart cut a curve.
Cut a curve.
Yeah, meaning the music itself triggers a psychological and almost physical sensation of the speed and precision of the drift. It just transports you back to those winding roads. And it's so rare for a simple dance genre to achieve that level of emotional and physical memory trigger.
So what does this all mean for you listening? The story of Initial D and Eurobeat is a perfect example of how media can redefine a genre and link a sound to a very specific, deeply felt emotional state. We'd encourage you to consider what other genres of music in your own life are acting as a kind of memory fuel for past impulses, past ambitions, or maybe the accelerated feeling of your own youth.
What sounds make your heart suddenly cut a curve, accelerating you back to a moment in time?
The deep dive is complete.